Today, we will share a story about bee and its stinger. But before that, let's get familiar with some words first. Sting. What is happening in this picture? The boy is being stung by a bee. When a bee stings, it pricks the skin with its sharp stinger, and it hurts. Beak. We can see a toucan in the picture. The arrow is pointing to the bird's beak, which is hard and sharp. Blossoms. We see flowers in the picture. Another word for flowers is blossoms. Pair. We see a pair of mittens. A set of two things that belong together is called a pair. Fear. What is the boy in this picture afraid of? A spider. When you are afraid of something, you fear that thing. Brave. When you are brave, you do something even though you might be afraid to do it. The firefighter has to be very brave to fight fires and save people and animals who are in trouble. Protect. We see a girl riding her bike. She is wearing a helmet and elbow and knee pads. These will protect her from getting hurt if she falls down. Store. We can see the squirrel is storing a lot of nuts, so it will have them later. Squirrels store food for the winter. Look at the picture again and find the little box in the corner. We can see a store. Yes, store also means a place where you buy things. Miserable. This little girl looks miserable. When you're miserable, you're really unhappy about something. Did you ever have a bad cold, where your nose is stuffed up and you feel hot and achy? That is feeling miserable. Wing. We can see a bird in this picture. The arrow is pointing to the bird's wing. The bird's wings allow it to fly through the air. Some kinds of insects and bars have wings too. So do airplanes. Next, let's move to today's story. How the bee got its stinger. Caroline and her dad sat looking out the window, watching the last few leaves fall off the trees. Inside, it felt snug and warm. "I'm glad it's getting colder," said Caroline. She pointed to the little red bump on her hand. "Now I can play outside without getting stung by a bee." Yesterday, Caroline was playing hopscotch at school. A bee flew out of the milkweed patch and stung her on the hand. It hurt a lot, and Caroline tried to be brave and not cry. She couldn't understand why a bee would sting her. After all, she wasn't bothering the bee. Now Caroline was a little afraid of bees. "Dad, why do bees have stingers?" Caroline wanted to know. "Bees need stingers to protect themselves," said Caroline's dad. "Would you like to hear a story about how the bee got its stinger?" A long time ago, bees didn't have stingers at all. Since bees are really tiny, it was hard for them to protect themselves from bigger animals. The other animals loved the taste of the sweet honey the bees made, so they were always stealing it. "I'll bet you can guess which animal especially liked the honey," said Caroline's dad. "The bears, of course," answered Caroline. "You're right," said Caroline's dad. The bees tried hanging their hives in the tops of the trees, but the bears were able to climb up and find them. The hummingbirds drank up the golden honey with their long, pointed beaks. The squirrels and chipmunks always seemed to find the hives too. The poor bees had to keep making more and more honey. Since they needed the nectar from flowers to make honey, they had to keep looking for more and more blossoms. Their life was hard. Finally, winter came, and the flowers withered and died. The bees couldn't make more honey. Since they hadn't been able to store any honey for the winter, they had nothing to eat. So the hungry, miserable bees decided to go see the wise man, Nanabush. "What can I do for you?" he asked. The little bees told Nanabush their story. "Look at our little bodies and tiny wings," they said. One pair of bees flew around Nanabush. "We can't protect ourselves against strong animals like the bears." Nanabush listened and thought carefully about the bees' problem. Finally, he said, "You bees are a fine community, all working hard together, so I will give you something to help protect you from the other animals." "Can you guess what Nanabush gave them, Caroline?" Dad asked. "A stinger?" she guessed. Exactly. He gave each of them a sharp, pointed stinger at the end of their tail. Now they could sting anyone who tried to take their honey. The squirrels, chipmunks, and birds learned their lesson quickly. After they got stung a few times, they stopped stealing the bees' honey. But the bears still wouldn't give up. So the bees made a plan. When a bear got near their hive, all the bees got together and stung him at the same time. The bear went yelping and stumbling into the forest, so finally the bears learned to think twice before stealing honey from the bees, and the bees were able to store enough honey for the winter. They didn't have to fear the other animals anymore. "I get it," said Caroline. "I must have been near a beehive and that's why they stung me." "That makes sense," agreed Dad. As Caroline and her dad watched the first snowflakes gently falling from the sky, Caroline was relieved. She was glad the bees were able to protect themselves and store enough food for winter. And now that she knew to stay away from beehives, she didn't feel afraid of bees anymore. The end.